Here he is. Good to
Hi,
see you,
David.
man.
Good to see you.
I told them you'll be back. You'll be back. No worries. And the reason I'm mentioning Pakistan because you heard what happened to the 5 Chinese engineers that were. What do you think of that incident, Carl? Was it a setup? Because I am leaning towards that outcome because they don't want China to develop that part of Gwadar in Pakistan. What's
Yeah,
your
I
take
mean
on that?
this. So the whole reason for Pakistan is one of the area in the world that China pour a lot of investment for the Belt and Road project. It's because
Uh-huh.
in particular this is called CPEC, the China Pakistan Economic
Economic corridor.
Corridor.
Corridor,
So
yeah.
the idea is China will link up Pakistan, will build up the infrastructure that the Chinese goods can travel through the length of Pakistan to the port of Gwadar on the Arabian Sea, which is Gwadar is strategically located at very close to the mouth of Persian Gulf, to the
Indeed.
Strait of Hormuz, and
Yeah.
and it's a natural port. So the idea is China is building a different connection point because the U.S. Navy has been very explicit that they're going to use the Strait of Malacca as a choking point to choke off the energy supply to China in times of war. So what China is doing is they're doing this so-called string of pearl strategy. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to build multiple connection points. We're going to build a port in Gwadar. We're going to build a port in Myanmar. And then we're going to build pipelines and roads and railroad link it to China. So U.S. Navy cannot be at all places at all time. You know, the strategic location of Strait of Malacca is because currently 80% of China's energy supply have to traverse
Goes through.
from the Persian Gulf to Strait of
Indeed.
Malacca
Yeah.
up the South China Sea. This is why U.S. is also making trouble in the South China Sea. By the way, it's to show China, hey, we can make trouble for you anytime. You know, U.S. keep on saying, oh, South China Sea is a very important trade route for the world trade. You know, and this is why we have to protect it. But what they don't tell you is 80% of the trade going through South China Sea is either to or from China. So U.S. Navy is saying, we're going to protect the trade to China from China in the South China Sea.
China.
But what they're really doing, they're saying, look, we can school with your supply lines. We have a presence in South China Sea. You know, we can always cause trouble for you. We can block the Strait of Malacca. So China says, you know what? Okay, that means we can't put our eggs in one basket. We're gonna have to build alternatives. So this is where Port of Gwadar comes from on Pakistan. Because it's a very nice port. It's very close to the Persian Gulf. China's plan is to build a oil and gas pipeline, so oil tankers can come from Persian Gulf, unload at Port of Gwadar, and the oil and gas can get piped back into China through Pakistan. And China is also building roads and railroad links, so Chinese manufactured goods can be shipped to Pakistan, and from Port of Gwadar to the rest of the world. That completely bypass South China Sea and Straits of Malacca. So U.S. don't want that. This is not what U.S. want to see. But there's also India, because India doesn't want, because India and Pakistan rivalry has gone on since the creation of India,
course,
since the partition in 1948. So India don't want to see Pakistan stabilized, because all this Chinese investment into Pakistan is to help to stabilize Pakistan, to make it, because China prefers stability on its borders. But that's not something India is interested in. And the area they're building the Gwadar port, it's an area in Pakistan called the Balochistan. Balochistan had always had like a separatist movement. And the separatist movement, the Balochistan Liberation Army, has ties with Indian intelligence service RAW, the Chinese, the Indian intelligence service,
Yeah.
but also with Americans. Because this is where U.S. and Indians might be working together. They're funding the Balochistan Liberation Army as to keep Pakistan off balance. Because Pakistan is an interesting case because it's a close ally with China, but it's also close with U.S. because U.S. during the Cold War used Pakistan as a launching pad to counter Soviet Union in Afghanistan. But after Cold War is over, U.S. kind of kicked Pakistan to the curb. It's like, okay, we don't need you anymore.
We're done with you.
We're done with you. So in that time, that's when China came through for Pakistan, offering both military aid and economic aid. So Pakistan still maintains tie with U.S. But this is the way U.S. Work with its proxies. It wants to have some leverage. Some leverage to keep them on the leash, and like so a completely stable, independent Pakistan is also not in the U.S. interest. They want to have certain leverage, and leverage is through this separatist movement, like either the Balochistan Liberation Army or the ISIS-K. That's the ISIS Khorasan.
Khorasan, yes,
and also the so-called Pakistani Taliban. So this through these shadow groups, the U.S. three-letter agencies can keep Pakistan off balance, but also make it dependent on U.S. This is how U.S. works traditionally, and this is also just so happened these groups are also very convenient to leverage against the Chinese interests. I mean, there's a recent Vice article, and also I think from New York Times reporting on ISIS-K after their claimed attack on Russia, on Moscow. And ISIS-K, they also have in the recent years they have made China their primary target. The ISIS-K also target Chinese interests inside Pakistan, Afghanistan. Now the ISIS-K is making like liberation of the Uyghurs their top priority. It's very people can look at this. What have ISIS-K done since October, since the conflict in Gaza? ISIS-K did not attack Israel. It did not attack U.S. Instead, ISIS attacked.
All right, let's pick up where we left off. I was talking to the community about the role of India in BRICS, the role of Philippines in ASEAN, because to me, those two countries in both blocks, I look at them as a weak link. They dragging the entities down. And one of the individuals put a question saying that I heard that India might be leaving BRICS. That would be good.
The Philippines is an interesting case because among all the Southeast Asian countries, Philippines is the only one that did not have a favorable view of China's Belt and Road Initiative, because China's investment in almost all the Southeast Asian countries dwarfs the U.S. investment, with the exception of the Philippines, because after Bongbong Marcos have come to power, he rolled back a lot of the signed joint project with China in the Philippines. So a lot of the Chinese project in Philippines are on hold right now, and as we know, Bongbong Marcos' dad, Ferdinand Marcos, gathered billions, literally hundreds of billions of corrupt money, he extracted from the Philippines and stashed in the offshore account. And those accounts are controlled by the U.S. U.S. has froze those accounts. And if Bongbong Marcos ever hoped to get his hands on his dad's money, or really the Filipinos' money, he has to get the go-ahead from U.S. So I think U.S. made him an offer he couldn't refuse. And if you want money, if you want your dad's corrupt money, you have to do what we say. So Philippines has now fully aligned itself with the U.S. interest in the region. and this including restarting the South China Sea tensions with China. Now, South China Sea was mostly, between China and Philippines were mostly okay during Duterte's term, because Duterte's whole foreign policy was to pivot away from the United States and toward China and Russia, and so during that time, China, Philippine tie were mostly friendly, and Bongbong Marcos, during the election, because Duterte cannot serve, he can only serve maximum 2 terms. He cannot run for another term. So Bongbong Marcos, to reassure Duterte and his faction, he said, well, I'm going to keep your policy. I'm going to, and he, in fact, right after Bongbong Marcos got elected, he actually went to China and meet with Xi Jinping. Until until U.S. made him an offer he couldn't refuse. He went to Washington, totally signed on Washington's anti-China crusade. Now Philippines is a cat's paw for U.S. military to extend its influence in South China Sea.
The situation is very unfortunate for the Philippines, which was united under President Duterte for the independent foreign policy, and ASEAN, of course, I have to mention. And the Philippines had been working very well together for prosperity and peace in the region until 2023. Let us make that distinction when BBM, Bongbong Marcos, started approving all these military bases. So this is a strategic move of the U.S. One of our military analyst, General Victor Corpus, has said the aim of the U.S. in the pivot to Asia is to create tension and war in the region, not to win, because the U.S. cannot win against China in Asia, but to depress the Asian economy and Chinese economy by at least 30% decline of its GDP.
Now they're talking about sending U.S. Coast Guards to the South China Sea. I mean, I don't know what they're gonna do. A U.S. Coast Guard gonna do in South China Sea. I mean, maybe they can engage in water cannon fights against the Chinese Coast Guards. But they will lose. They will lose because the Chinese Coast Guard ship are much larger than anything U.S. Coast Guard has in stock. So, that's why Blinken was in the Philippines recently, saying that U.S. has an iron-clad commitment to the U.S.-Philippine Mutual Defense Treaty, and he said that includes South China Sea.
Now, we stand with the Philippines and stand by our ironclad defense commitments, including under the Mutual Defense Treaty. Article 4 extends to arm attacks on the Filipino Armed Forces, public vessels, aircraft, including those of its Coast Guard, anywhere in the South China Sea.
This is actually a new development because when U.S. and Philippines signed the Mutual Defense Treaty in 1951, the commitment for U.S. is to the Filipino sovereign territory, and this was defined in the 1898 Treaty of Paris, when after the Spanish-American War, U.S. have took Spain as a colony from Spain, and the Filipino territory was defined in the 1898 Treaty of Paris, which did not include the South China Sea. And the Filipino claim to the South China Sea actually dating from 1970s, way after 1951 U.S.-Filipino defense treaty. So the Blinken statement and the new statement from U.S. State Department now is basically extending the U.S.-Filipino Mutual Defense Treaty to cover the South China Sea, to cover this new claim that happened after 1972. Now, this is very dangerous, but I don't think U.S. will do much in that front because U.S. have essentially 3 options. They can send the U.S. Coast Guards in to engage in water cannon fights against Chinese Coast Guards. But like I said, they're going to get their ass kicked because the Chinese Coast Guard ship is much bigger. So that's not a real good option. Option number 2, U.S. can send the Navy, U.S. Navy. They can send the Navy. They can bring the gun to a water cannon fight. But if you U.S. Navy fire a missile at the Chinese Coast Guard, that means war. That means World War III and nuclear exchange and all that. So that's option number 2. Now, option number 3 is U.S. will make a lot of noise about Chinese aggression in South China Sea. U.S. will send its reporters from CNN, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, whatever, on the Filipino ships to take a lot of film footages and say, oh, look at the aggressive Chinese behavior in South China Sea by water cannoning the Filipino ships, and use that as an excuse, an opportunity to redeploy U.S. troops to the Philippines. Because let's remember, U.S. military has been kicked out of the Philippines after 1990s because they just bring crime and prostitution to the CPEC naval base and Clark Air Base, and U.S. didn't want to pay because Filipino parliament says that this is create a huge burden on us. You need to pay more, and U.S. didn't want to pay, so they got kicked out. But now U.S. want to come back through uses tension as a backdoor to funnel U.S. military back to the Philippines. Now they have an agreement to put U.S. military on 9 Filipino bases.
It's an expansion of an existing mutual defense treaty from 2014 known as EDCA. EDCA initially granted American troops access to these 5 Philippine bases. Now, the U.S. will have access to 4 more bases, conveniently, mostly located facing either Taiwan or the South China Sea.
Facing South China Sea and facing Taiwan. So in the meantime, U.S. will verbally voice their support for the Philippines, but what in actuality, they're just pumping out a lot of propaganda against China and then deploy a lot of their military assets to the Philippines, but not actually helping Philippines in terms of enforcing the Filipino claim. So I think that is the most likely scenario. Well, I think that's what's happening right now. The goal is not necessarily start a war, but increasing tensions. So U.S. can continue to sell weapons. It continue to reinforce its military posture, justify its military presence in East Asia. I think that's a main U.S. goal. But what does Philippines gain out of this? Well, Bongbong Marcos might see some of the money. I mean, that's what the Philippines getting out of it.
Yeah, good luck with that.
I mean, how does that filter down to average Filipinos?
They are not welcome here. This is our country. This is not just a battlefield for practice, for wars.
I'm on a boat with a group of local Filipino fisher folk who are protesting the increased U.S. military presence here in the Philippines, saying it's directly impacting their livelihood. They've been banned from fishing in the sea for several days during Balakatan, a significant setback considering fisherfolk are the poorest segment of Philippine society.
Ang aming pagtutol ay hindi lang naman sa balikatan, kung hindi yung pinagmumula ng balikatan. Dapat ang EDCA ay i-review o kaya naman ay abolish na dahil hindi naman ito tugon sa kahirapan, sa krisis ng mangingisda, sa krisis ng Pilipinas.
We have seen and have heard about the stories of women who have been raped and murdered because of American soldiers who want to experience pleasure after their work.
I've always been against foreign military forces in the country. There are no winners in war.
Manuel Mamba is the governor of Cagayan province, which is just 250 miles from Taiwan. Even though he was against the EDCA expansion, his province will still see more U.S. troops. What's the worst-case scenario?
And when military equipments will be placed in my province, that would be a magnet if and when war would erupt.
What is your province's relationship to China?
We never had problems with them. And in every major city and major town here, we have Chinese communities. They have always been part of us too.
Couldn't the presence of the U.S. military be an economic boon to your province?
Well, there's no denying it could, but I see a bigger boon with reconnecting with the market itself. China had this unprecedented growth in economy in the last 40 years. We have never been part of it, despite the fact that we're nearest to them. Opportunities are not with us. Food is sometimes scarce. I'm also trying to seek out what's the best for our country.
How do you respond to the voices that say President Marcos invited the U.S. military here and there's a lot to be gained from the United States, like safety?
That's a total lie. That's a complete lie. I mean, the U.S. has always been here, since 1901. If you want to help us, get out of our territory, off our own land, off our own seas, off our own women. Get out of our country, my goodness, you're not helping us at all.
I don't know.
No, yeah. This is the same arrangements that we see with South Korea and Japan.